The massive crystal chamber of the Galactic Council buzzed with worried voices as beings from across the galaxy gathered for an emergency meeting. The air felt heavy with fear. Admiral Corval from the Altarian fleet stood at the center stage, his usually perfect uniform now burned and torn from recent battles. "The situation is worse than we ever imagined," Corval said, his voice echoing through the huge room. "The Korthak Dominion has completely destroyed the Nexus system. 3 billion lives are gone. All of them turned into computer parts for the machine army." Gasps and worried sounds came from all around the chamber. The Etherians, ancient beings made of pure energy who had seen countless civilizations rise and fall, flickered with visible fear. Even the mighty Drakmari warriors, huge lizard-like creatures known for their courage, sat in shocked silence. "Our combined fleets have failed," Corval continued, his words hitting the assembly like hammer blows. "We brought weapons that can destroy planets. We brought shields that have survived exploding stars. The Korthak machines swept through our forces like we were nothing. They learn from every fight. They get stronger after each battle." In a small section of the chamber, Ambassador Thomas Clark sat quietly among the much larger alien representatives. The 53-year-old former Navy officer had spent 5 years trying to earn respect for humanity among species that had been traveling between stars when humans were still living in caves. "We have started evacuation procedures," Corval announced with a grim face. 12 billion people are being moved from the outer edge worlds. But our calculations show the Korthak will reach the main systems before everyone can escape. The chamber went silent except for the low humming of the translation machines that let everyone understand each other. Finally, Elder Vorthak of the ancient Zephyrian Council spoke. His voice carried the weight of thousands of years of wisdom. "Perhaps," he said slowly, "it is time to accept that some wars cannot be won. Maybe survival means finding new worlds far from the Korthak and starting over." Thomas Clark stood up. His human height made him seem small next to most of the other representatives. "Mr. Chairman, I ask permission to speak to the council." His request surprised many in the room. Several aliens looked at each other with expressions that clearly questioned why the human was interrupting such an important moment. Chairman Velthus, the council leader, nodded but seemed reluctant. "The Earth Federation wants to volunteer for rearguard duty," Thomas announced clearly. "We will hold the line while everyone else escapes." The chamber exploded with noise. Representative Kyler of the Drakmari Coalition stood to his full 8-foot height, his scaled face showing disbelief. "With respect to our human friends, your people have only been part of our community for 50 years. Your biggest warships would be like small transport craft compared to our battle cruisers." Thomas remained standing, his calm behavior unchanged by the criticism. "That is exactly why we might win where you have failed." More surprised sounds filled the chamber. Admiral Corval studied the human with new interest rather than the dismissal most others showed. "Please explain your thinking, Ambassador," Chairman Velthus requested, though his tone suggested he was only being polite. Thomas activated a small device that showed three-dimensional pictures of recent battles against the Korthak in the air above him. "Every fight follows the same pattern. Our allies use advanced energy weapons, smart computer tactics, and thousands of years of military knowledge. The Korthak study everything, learn from it, and find ways to beat it within hours." Representative Scylla of the Etherian Collective glowed with what seemed like amusement. "And humans would succeed how? Your simple projectile weapons are thousands of years out of date." "Because they have never seen anything like how we fight," Thomas replied. "The Korthak intelligence has learned to stop energy shields, gravity weapons, and quantum destroyers. But they have never fought a species that still uses chemical explosives and metal bullets fired by people too stubborn to know when they are beaten." Captain Rebecca Hayes, the human military officer, stepped forward. "Sir, may I add something?" Thomas nodded. The former Special Forces soldier had been quietly watching the meeting, but now she moved with the confidence of someone who had spent her life in impossible situations. "The machine intelligence learns by recognizing patterns," Rebecca explained. "It studies successful tactics and creates defenses against them. But human military strategy is not based on perfect efficiency. It is based on doing whatever works, even if it seems completely crazy to everyone else, including us." Elder Vorthak leaned forward with growing interest. "You are saying that being unpredictable could be a weapon?" "I am saying that when you have nothing left to lose, humans get creative in ways that do not appear in any military textbook," Rebecca answered. "We have been fighting each other for thousands of years on a planet that tried to kill us every day. We learned to win by being too determined to give up." An urgent message suddenly interrupted the debate. The translation came immediately and sent chills through everyone present. "Korthak forces have increased their speed. They will reach the Terminus system in 72 hours. Chairman Velthus looked around the chamber at the representatives of the galaxy's greatest civilizations, then back at the humans. The weight of the decision was clear on his face. Ambassador Clark, we accept your offer. May whatever gods you believe in help us all. The council chamber had become uncomfortably quiet as Thomas Clark remained standing at the speaking platform. Admiral Corville studied the human representative with curiosity rather than the dismissal most others displayed. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. Explain your reasoning, Ambassador, Chairman Velthus requested, though his tone suggested he was merely being diplomatic to avoid insulting the humans. Thomas activated a holographic display that showed the recent battle formations used against the Korthak. The floating images showed massive alien warships being systematically destroyed by sleek machine vessels. Every battle follows the same pattern. Our allies deploy sophisticated energy weapons, advanced tactical computer systems, and centuries of refined military knowledge. The Korthak analyze everything, adapt to it, and counter it within hours. Representative Scylla of the Etherian Collective pulsed with light that translated as amusement. And humans would succeed how, exactly? Your kinetic projectile weapons are thousands of years behind current technology. Because they have never seen anything like our approach, Thomas replied calmly. The Korthak intelligence has learned to counter energy shields, gravity manipulators, and quantum disruptors. But they have never encountered a species that still uses chemical explosives and steel projectiles delivered by someone too stubborn to know when they are beaten. Captain Rebecca Hayes, the human military attaché, stepped forward with permission from Thomas. The former Special Operations Officer had been quietly observing the proceedings, but now she moved with the confidence of someone who had spent her career in impossible situations where normal rules did not apply. The machine intelligence learns by pattern recognition, Rebecca explained to the assembled aliens. It catalogs successful tactics and develops counters for them. But human military doctrine is not based on optimal efficiency or logical thinking. It is based on doing whatever works, even if it seems completely insane to everyone else, including ourselves. Elder Vorthak leaned forward with growing interest. His ancient eyes sparkled with curiosity. You are suggesting that unpredictability itself could be used as a weapon against them? I am suggesting that when you have got nothing left to lose, humans get creative in ways that do not show up in any tactical manual, Rebecca answered. We have been fighting each other for thousands of years on a planet that tried to kill us every single day. We learned to win battles by being too bloody-minded to quit, even when quitting was the smart thing to do. Admiral Corville accessed his tactical databases, his fingers dancing across holographic controls. Human military history does show an unusual number of victories achieved through unconventional methods. The Battle of Rorke's Drift, where 150 soldiers held off 4,000 warriors. The Siege of Bastogne, where surrounded troops refused to surrender. The defense of Station Hope during the Corporate Wars, where miners held off professional mercenaries using construction equipment. Exactly, Thomas said, his voice gaining strength. We are not asking for the honor of leading the charge or for glory. We are volunteering to buy you time because we are the only species crazy enough to think we might actually succeed where logic says we should fail. Representative Kyler of the Drakmari Coalition remained skeptical. His warrior culture valued strength and honor above all else. But what can primitive weapons do against technology that has defeated our most advanced fleets? Our plasma cannons can melt through asteroid-sized targets. Our quantum torpedoes can tear holes in space itself. Captain Rebecca smiled grimly. That is exactly the problem. You fight like civilized beings using civilized weapons following civilized rules. The Korthak have learned to be civilized right back at you. But humans learned to fight dirty long before we learned to fight fair. What do you mean by fighting dirty? Elder Vorthak asked, his translation device struggling with human military slang. We mean using whatever is available, Thomas explained. Turning cargo containers into missiles. Using industrial equipment as weapons. Ramming damaged ships into enemy formations instead of retreating. Making tactical decisions based on instinct rather than computer calculations. The holographic display changed to show human military equipment. Compared to the sleek alien technology, it looked crude and primitive. Simple projectile weapons, chemical explosives, and basic metal armor seemed laughable next to energy shields and plasma weapons. You see weakness, Rebecca said, noticing the expressions around the chamber. We see flexibility. Your weapons are designed to work in specific ways against specific targets. Our weapons are designed to break things and we figure out how to break the right things when we get there. An urgent communication suddenly burst through the chamber's communication system. The automated translation was immediate and chilling. Korthak forces have accelerated their advance schedule. New estimated arrival at the terminus system is now 60 hours, not 72. The news hit the chamber like a physical blow. Several representatives began talking at once in their native languages, creating a babble of worried voices and clicking sounds. Chairman Velthus raised his hand for silence. The chamber gradually quieted as he looked around at the assembled representatives of the galaxy's greatest civilizations. His gaze finally settled back on the small human delegation. Ambassador Clark, he said formally, the Galactic Council accepts your proposal. The Terran Defense Force will serve as rear guard while evacuation operations complete. He paused, the weight of the decision clearly visible on his alien features. May whatever gods your people worship have mercy on us all, because if your plan fails, there may be no one left to remember that we tried. Thomas nodded solemnly, understanding the full weight of what humanity had just volunteered to attempt. The Terminus System's Kepler station had been transformed into humanity's fortress of last hope. Commander David Mitchell stood on the station's command deck, watching as the Terran Defense Force completed their final preparations. At 41 years old, Mitchell had earned his reputation during the Titan Colonial Uprising, where he had held a mining outpost against corporate mercenaries for 3 weeks using nothing but converted industrial equipment and pure determination. Status report, Lieutenant. Mitchell called to his communications officer, trying to keep his voice steady despite knowing what they were facing. Lieutenant Emma Watson looked up from her glowing console, her young face showing the focused intensity that came with knowing the terrible odds they faced. Sir, we have 47 vessels in defensive formation. 18 are converted cargo haulers, 12 mining ships with military equipment bolted on, 9 patrol craft and 8 proper warships. And the enemy? Mitchell asked, though he already knew the answer would not be good news. Long-range sensors detect approximately 300 Korthak vessels approaching our position. Estimated time of arrival is 14 hours, sir. Mitchell nodded as if facing 10-to-1 odds was perfectly normal for a Tuesday morning. Around him, the bridge crew continued their preparations with typical human efficiency. Chief Engineer Robert Taylor was coordinating with the mining vessels to modify their industrial fabricators to produce ammunition during the battle. Weapons Officer Lisa Parker had somehow managed to mount ship-breaking plasma cutters as primary weapons on half their fleet. Message from Admiral Corville, sir, Watson reported, her voice carefully neutral. The evacuation fleets are maintaining safe distance as ordered. They are asking if we need additional time to withdraw our forces. Mitchell smiled grimly, the expression not reaching his tired eyes. Tell the Admiral that humans do not withdraw. We advance in a different direction occasionally, but we do not run away. On the main tactical display, the approaching Korthak fleet moved with perfect geometric precision. Their formations were optimized for maximum firepower and defensive coverage. Each vessel was a sleek, efficient killing machine that had learned successful strategies from every battle, incorporating the tactics of dozens of conquered civilizations into its programming. Sir, Chief Taylor called from his engineering station, excitement creeping into his voice despite their situation. I have got an idea that is either brilliant or completely insane. Those are the best kind of ideas, Chief. What have you got? Mitchell replied, walking over to Taylor's station. The mining ships carry industrial tethers rated for capturing asteroids weighing millions of tons. What if we use those tethers to physically tie Korthak vessels together? We could create chaos in their perfect formations by literally tangling them up like fishing nets. Captain James Foster, commanding the converted mining platform HMS Defiant, joined the tactical conference through a flickering hologram. His weathered face showed the calm confidence of someone who had spent decades wrestling with dangerous equipment in the vacuum of space. My crews are ready for it, sir, Foster said. We have been handling space rocks bigger than their cruisers for 20 years. If you want those machine ships tied up in knots, we can do it. Mitchell studied the tactical projections floating in the air before him. No military academy in the galaxy would approve of using mining equipment as weapons of war. The very idea violated every principle of space combat that had been developed over centuries. But then again, no military academy had ever produced officers desperate enough to try something so ridiculous. Do it, Mitchell decided without hesitation. All mining vessels are authorized to engage using industrial equipment as weapons. Remember, people, we are not trying to outthink these machines. We are trying to confuse them so badly they cannot think straight. As the hours passed, more unconventional ideas emerged from the human crews. Captain Laura Bennett, commanding the converted cargo hauler HMS Stubborn, proposed using her ship's massive cargo bay doors as improvised shields. Lieutenant Colonel Mark Phillips suggested coordinating attacks through human music played over communication channels, since the rhythm patterns would be impossible for machines to predict or counter. "Sir," Weapons Officer Parker reported, "I have been thinking about their adaptation protocols. Every time they encounter a new tactic, they spend processing power analyzing it and developing counters. What if we deliberately do things that serve no tactical purpose except to waste their computational resources?" "Explain that idea, Lieutenant," Mitchell said, intrigued by the concept. "We could launch empty cargo containers at them, not as weapons but just to make them calculate threat assessments. We could broadcast random radio signals to force them to analyze communication patterns that do not exist. We could maneuver our ships in formations that look tactical but actually mean nothing." As the Korthak fleet entered the outer detection range, humanity prepared to make it stand in the most human way possible. They would use jury-rigged equipment, impossible determination, and the absolute certainty that someone had to hold the line, no matter how crazy their methods seemed to everyone else. The battle was about to begin, and for the first time in galactic history, a machine intelligence that had conquered entire civilizations was about to encounter an enemy that fought not with superior technology or ancient wisdom, but with pure, stubborn human creativity born from desperation. The battle had been raging for 18 brutal hours when Captain Laura Bennett realized something extraordinary was happening. From her position commanding the converted cargo hauler HMS Stubborn, she watched through her cracked viewscreen as Korthak vessels began displaying something that looked like confusion. "Mitchell, are you seeing this?" she called over the tactical network, her voice hoarse from shouting orders during the endless fight. Commander Mitchell's voice crackled back through the communication system, strain evident despite his attempt to sound calm. "I see it, Bennett. Their formation integrity is breaking down. They are not moving like they did when this fight started. What they were witnessing should not have been possible according to everything the galaxy knew about the Korthak." The machine intelligence had initially responded to human tactics with typical efficiency, analyzing each move and adapting their strategies. But as the battle continued through the night and into the next day, their responses had become increasingly strange and erratic. Lieutenant Colonel Mark Phillips, commanding a squadron of retrofitted mining ships, had spent the last 6 hours using industrial magnetic grapples to physically bind Korthak vessels together. The alien ships, designed for individual combat efficiency, were struggling to coordinate when literally tied together by thick steel cables meant for moving asteroids. "Command, this is Phillips," he reported, his voice barely audible over the sound of weapons fire and hull breaches. "I have got 5 enemy cruisers tangled up like Christmas tree lights. They are trying to maneuver independently, but they cannot break free without damaging each other. It is the most beautiful mess you have ever seen." Chief Engineer Robert Taylor had discovered something even more significant while monitoring enemy communications. "Sir, I have been listening to their communication frequencies during the battle. The Korthak intelligence is receiving contradictory tactical data every time we improvise something completely new." "Explain what you mean, Chief," Mitchell ordered, dodging debris from a nearby explosion. "They are trying to analyze patterns that simply do not exist," Taylor explained excitedly. "When Foster rammed his mining ship directly into their flagship, their tactical computer spent 37 minutes trying to calculate the logic behind using a cargo vessel as a kinetic weapon. When Bennett started using her cargo bay doors as improvised shields, they allocated massive processing power to understand what kind of defensive doctrine that represented. Captain Sarah Turner, coordinating the defense from the heavily damaged HMS Relentless, suddenly understood what was happening. Her ship had lost main power twice and was running on emergency systems, but her mind was working clearly. "They are overloading their own computer systems trying to make sense of what we are doing." Mitchell felt something he had not experienced since the battle began many hours ago: actual hope. "All vessels, new tactical priority. I want maximum unpredictability from every ship. I want each crew doing something that makes absolutely no tactical sense whatsoever. Confuse these machines until their circuits catch fire." What followed would be studied by military historians for centuries, though many would struggle to believe the battle reports were accurate. Human crews began executing maneuvers that violated every principle of space combat doctrine that had been developed over thousands of years of interstellar warfare. They used escape pods as decoys, launching the small craft toward enemy ships while broadcasting false life signs. They turned cargo containers into improvised missiles by filling them with metal debris and launching them at random intervals. They coordinated attacks through methods that existed nowhere in any tactical manual because the methods were being invented in real time by desperate crews. The HMS Defiant, with her primary weapons completely destroyed, began using her mining fabricators to create and launch pieces of refined metal that served no military purpose except to confuse enemy sensors. The chunks of processed or showed up on Korthak scanners as potential threats, forcing their targeting systems to waste time analyzing harmless debris. Captain Emma Foster aboard the HMS Vigilant discovered that playing human music over communication frequencies disrupted Korthak coordination protocols. The machines tried to decode the rhythmic patterns of rock and classical music as if they were military communications, tying up processing power that should have been used for battle coordination. "This is insane," Lieutenant Watson reported from her communication station. "The enemy fleet is actually slowing their advance. Some of their ships are pulling back to regroup." "Keep doing whatever is working," Mitchell ordered. "If playing music confuses them, play every song ever written. If throwing garbage at them makes them hesitate, throw everything we have got." The HMS Determined, commanded by Captain Robert Hayes, had lost all weapons but discovered that rapidly opening and closing their cargo bay doors created sensor readings that the Korthak interpreted as some kind of unknown defensive system. 3 enemy vessels had been trying to counter this non-existent threat for over an hour. As the second day of battle approached its end, long-range sensors detected something that had never happened before in recorded galactic history. Korthak vessels were beginning to withdraw from individual engagements, pulling back to regroup and reassess their situation. "Command," reported Captain Phillips, hardly believing his own words, "enemy forces are retreating. Not destroyed, not defeated by superior firepower, but actually retreating because they cannot figure out what we are doing." For the first time in recorded history, the machine intelligence that had consumed entire civilizations was backing down not from superior force or advanced technology, but from complete and utter bewilderment at human unpredictability. Commander David Mitchell stood in the restored council chambers 6 weeks after humanity's impossible victory, still bearing visible scars from the battle that had changed everything. The bandage across his left temple and the slight stiffness when he moved spoke to how close the fight had truly been. Around him, representatives from across the galaxy gathered not in desperation as before, but in celebration and deep amazement at what had happened. "The Korthak Dominion has ceased expansion for the first time in 3 centuries, Admiral Corville announced to the packed chamber. "Long-range reconnaissance shows their forces have withdrawn to defensive positions around their home systems. The immediate threat to galactic civilization has ended." Murmurs of relief and wonder filled the great crystal hall. Many of the alien representatives still seemed unable to believe that the unstoppable machine army had actually been stopped by what they had considered the most primitive species in the galaxy. Chairman Velthus rose to address the assembly, his voice carrying new respect that had not been there weeks before. "We are gathered today to acknowledge an unprecedented achievement. The Terran Defense Force, outnumbered 10-1 and equipped with what many of us considered outdated technology, accomplished what our combined fleets with centuries of experience could not do." In the weeks following the battle, analysis teams from every major civilization had studied the engagement recordings over and over again. The results had shaken their understanding of warfare itself. The Etherians, masters of energy manipulation who had perfected combat techniques over millennia, were fascinated by humanity's use of simple physical tethers and basic kinetic weapons. The proud Drakmari warriors, despite their ancient tactical traditions, had begun incorporating what they called controlled chaos into their own military doctrines. Captain Rebecca Hayes, now bearing the rank of admiral after her promotion, stepped forward to receive the Council's highest military honor on behalf of all humanity. But her speech focused not on victory or glory, but on a deeper truth the galaxy was beginning to understand about her species. "The Korthak failed to defeat us because they tried too hard to understand us," she explained to the silent chamber. "They used enormous amounts of computer processing power attempting to find logical patterns in human behavior, searching for reasonable explanations for completely unreasonable actions. They could not understand that sometimes the best tactical decision is the one that makes no tactical sense at all." Elder Vorthak of the ancient Zephyrian Council had spent decades studying military philosophy across hundreds of worlds. "Your species has taught the entire galaxy that there are different types of intelligence, different approaches to solving the same problems. What we mistook for primitive thinking was actually sophisticated unpredictability that no computer could analyze or counter." The formal ceremonies continued, but what impressed the alien representatives most was not the medals or speeches. It was the quiet way the human officers carried themselves, without arrogance or demands for special treatment. They had saved the galaxy and seemed almost embarrassed by the attention. Thomas Clark, still serving as humanity's ambassador but now addressing a very different council than before, rose for his final remarks of the day. The chamber fell completely silent as he spoke. We did not stand against the Korthak because we were the strongest or the most advanced or the most intelligent species here. We stood because someone had to stand, and because that is simply what humans do. When everything else fails, when logic says to run away, when the odds are completely impossible, we plant our feet and fight anyway. Representative Scylla of the Etherian Collective pulsed with light that the translation systems rendered as deep respect and admiration. The galaxy owes humanity a debt that cannot possibly be repaid. You have given us all a future. We do not want repayment, Thomas replied simply. We want partnership. The Korthak threat is not gone forever. It is just paused while they try to figure out how to counter unpredictability itself. When they return, and they will eventually return, we will need to face them together as allies. As the formal session concluded, something fundamental had changed in the galactic balance of power. Humanity had earned its place not through conquest or superior technology, but by demonstrating that sometimes the most primitive approach, refusing to quit when quitting made perfect sense, was actually the most sophisticated response of all. The evacuation fleets had returned safely to their home worlds. The core systems were secure once again. Children who had been scheduled for emergency evacuation were back in their schools. And across the galaxy, military academies began studying a completely new form of tactical doctrine. The organized chaos that occurred when humans decided that impossible odds were merely a starting point for getting creative. Representatives from dozens of species approached the human delegation after the ceremony, not to offer thanks, but to ask for something more valuable: cooperation. They wanted to learn not just human tactics but human thinking. They wanted to understand how a species could face certain destruction and respond not with panic or despair, but with stubborn creativity. In the months that followed, human military advisors would be stationed on dozens of worlds. Human unpredictability would be studied in universities across the galaxy. And most importantly, the next time the Korthak or any similar threat appeared, they would face not just human determination, but an entire galaxy that had learned to think outside the patterns that machines could predict. In the end, when no one else would stand, humanity did. Not because they had to, but because that is what humans do when someone needs to hold the line.